questions. But yeah, interrupt me if something, if you've got something that you want some clarity on, feel free to just interject and I'll stop and answer it for you. So I'm sure you guys have all, kind of feeling the pressure of this high rate environment that it feels like we've been in forever at this point. And I know it seems like, every time we get some relief on this thing that it ends up going back the other way. And that's, really what I want to focus on from the rate perspective at this point. It feels like the new norm right now is volatility, right? Like things are all over the place. People are a little bit unsure about, what's going to happen with the economy, where are rates going to go. And we're working at selling around that and kind of educating our buyers on what the future might look like and what rates are going to do, and trying to dispel fears on what rates might do and get people in situations that they're comfortable with, from a financing and home buying standpoint. So I'm going to go over just some drivers, things that are affecting rates and kind of things to look out for, things to kind of help you guys have these higher level conversations. And then I'm going to go over, my approaches for, for next year, kind of what I'm doing, how I'm posturing and having these conversations, a couple of tips and kind of ways that we can get creative to alleviate the high rate environment. And then maybe a couple of things, a couple of framing things that you can do to maybe get people off the fence, or dispel people's fears about, the high rate environment that we're in right now. So there's multiple factors driving rates. Obviously, like the big one is inflation. That's what we've, probably been hearing about for the last couple of years now. So they're really driving the inflation. The jobs reports, the job market is big. There's a lot of speculative stuff going on, like when Trump was reelected, right? The conversation shifted to, well, what does the Trump economy look like in 2025 and onward, right? So there was even some shifts in the market just because of like the tariff conversation that was being had. That was affecting rates, today for something that hasn't even happened yet. So there is a lot of speculation and baking in that goes into rates being priced. And that's why you guys probably remember when the Fed cut rates initially, mortgage rates did not drop off the bat because the mortgage rates were already baking that cut. They were already anticipating that cut. And really they're anticipating two cuts. So there is another likely cut in December of this year. Right now they've got that, they've got the chances of that happening at about 75%. And more than likely what that means is when the Fed cuts the prime rate in December, since they're already looking at it as being 75% likely, mortgage rates have been taking that into account already, right? So if they didn't cut rates in December, that would be looked at as the unexpected happening that could cause rates to go up. If they cut, mortgage rates will probably be vastly unaffected. I mean, it's not going to be a bad thing, but I don't think rates are going to, plummet because of a rate cut in December. If you guys think back to probably September of this year, we were under 6%. And I mean, I remember the social media post about, hey, we've made it, we're through the woods, rates are dropping, buyers are going to be, flooding the market. And we're at the end here. We're going to be making lots of money and rates are going to keep going down. And, within a couple of months that had changed. And I even had, so in October, I closed, I think, 9 government loan refinances on people that were I had locked, the previous couple of years, all over 6.75%. And I got them all down to like 5.75 or lower. And I had loan officers in my market that were like, oh, I'm not going to refi people now. Rates are going to keep going down. And then those people are going to go refinance again. And I'm going to lose my commission. Because the way our business typically works, when we close a deal, if that person doesn't make 6 payments, we actually end up paying our commission back. So, I mean, there were, seasoned loan officers in my market that when rates dropped in September, they were like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're in a downward trend. And, I'm not even going to worry about refinancing people right now because I want to hit them at the bottom. And it lasted for, a month and a half, and now we've been back up towards 7% in some instances. So, and all that to say, right? Like nobody
Good
knows
morning, Lee.
100% certainty. Sorry. Oh, okay. Nobody knows with 100% certainty what the future holds. The volatility is real. And I know it's tough to work around that because, again, at the end of the day, like, we can take it day by day and look at what the markets are doing and pretty accurately predict, like, we might see rates drop a little bit tomorrow. We might see rates go up a little bit tomorrow, but it is really hard to pinpoint, what this is going to look like on a long term basis. I do expect rates to go down. I mean, inflation is, again, I think going to continue to move in the right direction. I think the market's in a little bit of a holding pattern until president-elect goes in January and we can see what that Trump economy actually looks like, right? I don't think we're going to see a ton of movement between now and the end of the year, but there is some softening in the jobs market, the labor market, so that's going to drive rates. But all right, let's see here. Yep. So we're getting some jobs data this week. That's, again, that's been a big driver. That was really the big catalyst for where we're at right now. So right before the election, we had a blockbuster jobs report come in. And basically, like, any sign that they see that the economy is actually stronger than what they're anticipating it being or what they think it should be, that's bad for rates right now, because that's kind of keying back into, well, if the economy is still performing above expectations, then maybe the Fed, pauses their rate cuts. So it's all kind of intermingling. But again, I do think long term, like over the next year, 2025, we're going to see rates drop. And I'm still, carefully setting up a lot of my deals that way, right? Like, I'm obviously telling the client, we don't know with 100% certainty that this is going to be the case, but we do think, I think there's a good chance that next year we'll see rates drop. You guys will have a good opportunity to refinance. And so I'm setting up a lot of my, a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about are under that assumption, right? So going into my approach for next year, it's going to be, vastly the same that it's been for the last couple of years, right? Like, people are unsure, volatility is the norm, rates are high. People in our industry are hungry. There's lots of competition, right? There's supply and demand. The rates are a big barrier to entry for people. There's pretty much, a lot of, I know people have left our industry, but there's still a lot of mouths to feed and potentially not as many clients going around. And for me personally, like, I try to do the right thing. I think this kind of environment can sometimes breed bad practice, right? So, I'm vetting competing loan estimates. Like, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I get loan estimates all the time that I just by asking for that competing loan estimate, once you really dive into it, because a lot of these clients aren't they don't fully understand what these loan estimates are telling them, right? So that could be points and fees being charged, or a new one I'm seeing a lot on new construction is they've got all this builder money and they're putting these buyers in these extended locks for 6-month periods of time and charging them for it, and the clients aren't understanding that they're locking into that sometimes. So vetting every deal, treating every deal like gold, right? There's if you've got somebody that's in the market and willing to buy, that's gold in this environment, right? So leads are gold, and just the follow up is important. A lot of it is just kind of making sure people are, that you're there and available, and you're answering the phone, because again, the competition is up. So we have to be on our best. I'm sure you guys all know this, but fighting for every deal. So that's going to be vastly unchanged. I'm still seeing a lot of first time home buyers, at least in my market. I got a couple of applications over the weekend and they were almost carbon copy, first time home buyers needing down payment assistance. Again, remember, these people are not locked sub 3% interest rate, right? So you're going to continue to have first time home buyers in the market. And I think that's great. I have, I kind of I won't say shift in my business. I mean, I kind of, you had to because they were in the market, but I really focused on first time home buyers, first time home buyer programs, especially when rates started going up, because that was, that was advice that was given to me, is that these people aren't so much, they obviously they cared that rates are up. And the biggest thing is, it does tend to affect them more if you've got single income folks, this high rate environment does make it harder for them to qualify. But the demand is there. I'm having a lot of conversations with first time home buyers. I'm doing a lot of again, a lot of first time home buyer programs. It's definitely something I would advise you guys to look into and kind of educate yourself on, or get them to me, because like I said, I do a lot of them. Something that I think is a big cornerstone of like my success, and it's pretty much every conversation I have when I talk to somebody, I try not to sell rate, right? Like I'm not having a conversation of what interest rate do you want, because that immediately takes the conversation. I lose a little bit of leverage there potentially. And it just takes the conversation somewhere that it doesn't need to go potentially, right? So I try to sell payment. I try to pinpoint what their driver or their sticking point is. And then I kind of tailor my conversation to that. Again, if I pick up the phone and say, hey, what kind of rate do you think you're getting here? And they say 6.25, and the rate's at 6.5, although that might not be, a huge difference in payment. They might not understand that, and you're already off on a bad foot because, hey, I can't do that. Right. So, I kind of do the opposite of what everyone tells you to do when you're buying a car. I ask, what do you want your payment to be? Because that really does help me reverse engineer price point. It can help you, weed people out that are maybe having unrealistic expectations about what they're looking at. I get a lot of calls of people that just don't understand that the payment it's not this mysterious number that's just coming out of thin air. Like, it is made up of a couple of variables, of which we really don't have the means to manipulate that many. Like, a lot of these variables are set in stone, right? Like your taxes are going to be what your taxes are going to be. Your insurance, you have some leeway there, but within a small margin like that number is what it's going to be. So really, when it comes down to, we can manipulate down payment and we can manipulate the interest rate. And people just don't understand that, right? So a common conversation is, someone will call me and they're looking at a $250,000 house, and they want a $900 mortgage payment, and kind of break it to those people that, hey, your taxes and insurance alone on that might be $400 or $500, and then explain, unless you're putting $100,000 down or whatever it might be, that's not realistic. So, but yeah, I try to sell payment. Again, you have those people that have done their research and they're already kind of expecting payment that's realistic. That's great. Or it's a good chance to educate people. And I might not even have a conversation about, what the rate looks like. I'm hoping that I can get them the payment they want on the purchase price for the type of property they're looking at, and then they're happy with the rate because they are getting the scenario that they want anyway. But that's important. And again, in that conversation, trying to pinpoint the driver, like, is cash on hand more important? Is payment more important? You'll obviously have people that say both, right? Like, I want to put the least amount of money down and have the lowest monthly payment. But it's a good point to, it kind of sets me up to educate people on how mortgage payments work, right? And kind of get into, another huge part of like my sales pitch is, I compare everything on a cost versus savings basis. And I feel like once you start explaining this to people, that they kind of, their guard comes down a little bit, because they do understand that, like, hey, I'm not a used car salesman. I'm not throwing in all this, these random numbers, and like, this payment it's calculated this way, and there's really not that much mystique to it, right? So So again, a big one for me, I always explain to people, hey, every $10,000 you put down is approximately $50 a month on your monthly payment, right? And the inverse of that is correct. So every 10,000 extra you finance is an extra $50 a month on your monthly payment. And then I explained that, hey, the break even on that, right? So you're spending $10,000 to save $50 a month. It's going to take you 16 and a half years roughly to recoup that $10,000 by saving your $50 a month on your lower payment. So once that's a big like light bulb moment for a lot of people when you explain that. Then I really feel like people's guard does tend to come down sometimes because you'll have those people that are like dead set on, well, I'm putting 20% down. Why? Well, because I want to put 20% down, or 25 or 30 or whatever it might be. And then, or the people that are like, hey, I'm dead set on a $400,000 budget. Well, then when you explain, okay, well, you could go to 410 and your payment's going to go up $50 a month, right? Then you're kind of starting to give yourself some leeway on your price and opening up that conversation about, well, hey, what if we could get you $10,000 more in purchasing power at a cost of $50 a month? Would that be worth it to you? So that's just all part of my conversation that, from the first time I'm picking up the phone with them, that's something that I'm talking about. Another thing, I've been really big on temporary buy downs over the last couple of years. I still think there is a great place for those in the market we're in right now. I'm shifting on them a little bit. I've obviously the last couple of years been doing a lot of 2-1 buy downs because the assumption was, hey, there's going to be about a 2-year period where we're in this high rate environment, and then these people can have this stopgap of this temporary buy down, and rates will go down and they'll refinance. So I've shifted a little bit. I'm now kind of pitching the 1-0 buy down strategically. I'm having a lot of luck with that. I've got two. I've got one closing Friday and one that closed last week that I was able to kind of, I'm not going to say win the deal, but get the buyer the situation that they wanted because of the 1-0 buy down. And I will stop here and ask, like, is anyone not familiar with these temporary buy downs, or does anyone have any questions about how these work or compare to permanent buy downs? I'll just explain it. So the temporary buy down, you basically prepaying the difference in interest between the higher rate or the market rate and the lower rate. And kind of the way they work is really in the name. So the 2-1 buy down, it's a 2-year temporary buy down where the buyer gets a 2% lower rate the first year and a 1% lower rate the second year. The 1-0 buy down, the buyer gets a 1% lower rate for the first year. So again, where I'm at right now, I think rates drop next year at some point, right? So, and the 1-0 buy down is significantly cheaper than the 2-1 buy down. Like it's more than it's like half the cost. So, so again, if you get these people, we're in this high rate environment where, and it's kind of a unique situation where rates were low a couple of months ago and now they're up again, right? So you've got people that are a little bit discouraged. So this 1-0 buy down is a good tool where I can lock someone at 6.25 on, say, an FHA loan and actually package it as 5.25 for the first year with the opportunity to refinance on a streamlined, FHA streamlined refinance after they've made 6 payments. It's also a good tool. I had a situation where buyers were pre-qualified with another lender. They went under contract. They came to me after they were under contract to purchase this property. The other lender didn't catch something in the application. We caught it, and it ended up affecting the rate that they were going to be getting. And I was able to essentially get them the same rate for the first year utilizing this 1-0 buy down. And again, different buyer rates. We were talking back 6 months ago, new construction, and they were working with the builder at the time, and rates were low, and they came over and started working with me. And even though rates had gone up, like they weren't getting their 5.75 anymore, we were at about 5.25. I was able to tack on that 1-0 buy down, get them really 5.25 for the first year, even though they're locked at 6.25. Again, with the opportunity to refinance after 6 payments on an FHA streamlined loan at some point next year. So I still think there's a lot of utility there on the temporary buy downs. I'm not pushing permanent buy downs right now. If the buyer's really adamant about it, then, obviously it's a conversation that we'll have, but the way the temporary buy downs work, that the cost equals the savings, right? So you're just prepaying the interest, or hopefully the seller is prepaying the interest, the difference in the interest. So that money is applied monthly. So it is literally held in a separate account. And every month when they make their mortgage payment, the portion that covers that difference between the higher rate and the lower rate, which secures the lower payment for the borrower, it's applied towards that payment, right? So there is a chance, if rates drop, say 6 months from now or 5 months from now or whatever, and these folks refinance, there will be a portion of that buy down that has not been utilized, at which point those funds will be deducted from the principal balance on their loan. So they're not walking away from any money on these temporary buy downs. They're going to use it for the entire, life of the buy down period, or they're going to refinance and that money is going to be deducted from what they owe on their payoff. That's a great option. With a permanent buy down, let's say you've got someone that's looking at spending $10,000 to go from 6.5 to 6, right? And
This
rates
is
drop to
Allison
6 in
Greco's
6 months.
empowered thing that she has every
That
Wednesday.
you've wasted that money. If you get a
And she's got this
refinance,
guy
right, you
from
spend
Revolution Mortgage
$10,000.
that's on there. It's not just her, it's a bunch of other realtors in North.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, so that's why I'm kind of out on permanent buy downs right now. I do think that if rates drop at some point in the next year, you've got buyers that have spent, we're in a high rate environment, so permanent buy downs are more expensive. If you're spending, I just don't think the value is there to spend thousands of dollars on going from, a high rate to a slightly less high rate. But yeah, so I'm trying, and again, that's another one of those cost versus savings conversations, right? That you break that down to, hey, you're going from 6.5 to 6 at a cost of, $8,000. So you're spending an extra 8 at closing to have, the 6% interest rate, and you're saving, $100 a month. Break that down for them. And I literally give it to, I put it in the email and say like, hey, cost savings, break even might be 24 months or 36 months or what have you, and then it becomes a simple conversation of like, well, hey, do you think rates drop below 6% in 36 months? If so, this might not be the right move for you, because you're going to end up walking away from some of this money. So that's a big one. And again, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, we can manipulate rate and we can manipulate down payment, right? So these are kind of the tools that we use to manipulate rate, these temporary buy downs, permanent buy downs. But really there's not that many variables involved in making up these payments. So, and sometimes that is a challenge you have to overcome. And sometimes I think it, honestly, like I said, it kind of disarms people, makes them feel better once they see, how the sausage is made, per se. Like there's really not that many things in here that we can play with. So, let's see. Another big one, I kind of preach this a lot, but don't be afraid of FHA. I know you guys have, or maybe you guys don't know, but within the last, I would say, couple of years, there was they kind of spun it on the news that, hey, if you have good credit, you're going to pay more for your mortgage now. And so that's not entirely true. What they did was they changed what we call a loan level pricing adjustment. So it used to be, on a conventional loan, if you had a 740 credit score or higher, your top tier credit, you were getting the best shake at rates. You're going to get the best rate that you could. Other factors involved, like down payment and stuff. But as far as credit was concerned, 740 or higher conventional loan, you were in the top bracket. And they changed that to 780 or higher. So now, someone with a 740 is a couple of rungs below what the best top tier credit is for conventional. FHA at 680 or higher, you're getting the best FHA rate that you can. Also, within the last, I'll say year, maybe year and a half, they reduced the FHA mortgage insurance premium. So FHA is a really viable option, I think, even for people with like 700 plus credit scores. If you look at the average 30-year fixed FHA rate today on Mortgage News Daily is at 6.18%. The average 30-year fix is at 6.85%. So yeah, I mean, if I've got someone that's putting 20% down and they don't have top tier credit, that's a tougher. It's tougher to spend. You're not going to spend that from conventional because I'm not going to plug someone into FHA that wouldn't have mortgage insurance otherwise. But FHA has become, I think, a really viable option for, buyers that are highly qualified still, right? Like, I mean, 700 plus credit score because the payment's lower, right? And if that's a tool we can use to get people in a mortgage or in a house, and I mean, I think it makes sense to offer these people the lowest payment that we can. And I haven't really had any issues with listing agents on this when you explain to them that, hey, this is what's best for the buyer. The payment's lower. You can even go as far as saying they qualify conventionally as well. But yeah, so that's a couple of things that I'm doing, and kind of the way that I'm going into next year. And conversations I'm having, and how I'm kind of structuring my business and some of the stuff that I'm doing. I know I covered a lot of stuff. Do you guys have any questions? All right, Anna, do you have anything?
Hey, John, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So I know you kind of briefly touched on this earlier, but when you're talking about new construction and a lot of these in-house lenders with new construction, and you kind of briefly touched on like the hidden fees and lender
Right.
fees and increase. Could you expand on that a little bit? Like, I often try to explain to clients that they do pay for it in the long run with some of these lower off,
Right.
marketing tactics that they use. Could
Yeah.
you expand on that, how that works a little bit more?
Yeah, so I've had a couple. I'm not gonna go into any specifics builder wise, but I've had a few where I'm seeing the same kind of situation with the same builder where they're in the last couple of months. I'll get the loan estimate, and the builder's lender has locked the buyer into an extended lock. And so that, typically we can lock up to 90 days at no cost, no additional cost to the buyer, right? So once you go outside of that, there's a cost involved. There's usually an upfront cost. Obviously, there's going to be some cost baked into the rate. But I mean, I was seeing people putting people into like 6-month locks, right? In a period where we were pretty confident rates were going to be lower 6 months from now. And the reasoning behind that, I think, probably, partially it's just because the builder wants it locked, or the builder's lender wants it locked and out of their hands, because there is a lot of volatility. So I mean, I can see it making it easier for them, but I don't necessarily think that's what's best for the buyer. To be, I mean, I don't know any normal lender that's locking anyone outside of 30 days right now, typically, unless we're in one of those environments where, like in September, maybe, where rates had dropped, and you could have predicted that they were going to go back up, right? But if the consensus is that rates are going to be lower, 6 months from now than they are today, then I don't think, charging someone $9,000-$10,000 for these extended rate locks makes a great deal of sense. And I've seen it a couple of times from one builder, and I'm hearing it from the buyer, right? So I don't know what the protocol looks like, but the two that I had, the buyer was not, they weren't even sure that they were actually locked in, right? So and I think part of it is that, maybe they're just trying to utilize all the credit that they were giving, or, what have you. But yeah, and then that all, boils into too, like looking at origination fees, and, what's the builder's lender charging for origination fees? What are you paying in discount points, right? Because you'll see these estimates too, where, oh, I'm getting, X amount of dollars from the builder, but they're charging you, some crazy amount of discount points for a rate that wouldn't actually be costing that many points if I were to lock it in. And I'm not going to say like, hey, I can compete on every deal, and you've got someone throwing tens of thousands of dollars. When a builder owns their lender, your Hortons of the world and stuff like that, it's difficult to compete on that. I mean, I worked for D.R. Horton for 4 years. I worked for their lender for DHI Mortgage, and those are tough to compete with. I mean, the builder owns the lender, the funds are intermingled, right? Like their gain is everyone's gain, so they can lose money here and make it back there. And there are some situations where you just can't compete with these new construction incentives. But a couple of times I've gotten them with this one builder where they're charging for these extended locks, and it's like, man, I could lock you on that at on a 60-day lock or a 30-day lock for no points, and they're charging you because they locked them 6 months ago. They charged them, thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's kind of luck of the draw, just seeing, where the market has shifted, when it's time for them to lock and when I get the estimate. But yeah, I'm having some luck competing on those now, whereas in the past it might have been a lost cause because I don't have $20,000 to throw at them. But yeah, it's almost in these scenarios that I think the builder's lender had almost shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because they, once it's locked on that extended period like that, it's locked. Like that money is allocated, they've spent it. So when and if rates drop in the future, when it comes time for that client to lock, I can compete on that because I can get them potentially the similar rate without having to charge them for that extended lock period because they, closing's coming up or what have you. But yeah, that just goes back to always get a loan estimate. Make sure you're understanding when you're agreeing to lock something in. I mean, you shouldn't have a lender locking any rate without getting, the buyer's confirmation. But I have seen it happen a couple of times over the last few months where, the buyer's telling me they had no idea they locked in, and sure enough, they are. So, and a lot of times, like you said, those fees, that there might be fees, you can kind of sometimes see where that incentive's coming from, right? You can look at the fees and look at what's being charged, and maybe it's not apples to apples, right? So I always recommend get a competing option. Let me see if I can look at the loan estimate and actually go through it line by line with the client on the competing loan estimate, then I can explain what the fees are, and truthfully, at the end of the day, like I'm in this to make money, but I'm not in this to steer people to me for no reason. I mean, I probably sent more deals to the credit union here in North Carolina than some loan officers at the credit union, right? So if it's a better deal, it's a better deal. But there are deals to be won out there on new construction, even when they're offering these big incentives, because just of the way that they're utilizing the money. So it's case by case, obviously, but yeah, any of those you guys want me to take a look at, I'm happy to go over it with your clients and offer a competing loan estimate to see how we compare. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yep, definitely.
Anybody else have questions for John while his brain is here and turned on? Okay.
All right. Hey,
Well,
somebody
John,
come.
this has been very enlightening. Thank you for your time.
You. I know that was a lot of stuff, but hey, I'm my phone number and email is in that the group. I sent that out yesterday.
What's your number?
Do I know?
What's your number? 919-285.
6238.
One day I'm gonna memorize it. And Jay Wilkerson.
Yep, at revolutionmortgage.com. And I'm like you guys, I'm always working. If you guys need anything like nights, weekends, whatever, call me, text me. That is my personal cell phone number. I try to work when you guys work. So anytime you need me, hit me up. I'm happy to help. Yeah, let's kill it in 2025. Somebody come get this TV.
Yeah, send those applications and let's get some loans locked. I feel like they're predicting, 20-25% bump in the market just going into 25. I've actually kind of been double working here and chatting with Dina about our goals for next year and trying to figure out where's that sweet spot going to be. Agents on the call, if you need any kind of business planning coaching or conversations about those kind of things, let us know. But I do think the work you do right now is really going to show up January, February. So a lot of agents not working. The gap is getting larger. Brian, I just saw your message, a newer agent. Like there's so much opportunity in this market. It's not like it used to be, but there's a lot of opportunity to get up and get going. So take advantage of December. A lot less competition out there right now. So let's lock some loans and get set up so 2025 is easy breezy for everyone. Let's make lots of money and serve our community as well. Have a great one, everybody. I'll be here next week with something insightful. Fabian will be on the following week with something insightful. And then we will you probably take 2 weeks off for Christmas, so we can enjoy time with our families. And then we'll be obviously back up and rolling in January. So we've got 2 more weeks of Empower for 2025. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and go